Video unavailable. That does not make any sense.
It does say it's streaming live now on YouTube on my screen.
Oh, it says that on my screen also. So, checking in with the third party technology. La la la. What does it say on my phone? Because all of you, I am going to presume that we are live and chatting with folks watching in on the interwebs, either live or um, after the fact, that I will be checking my phone every now and again because that is how I can see your comments. And it is working. Delightful. I have no idea why my computer said that it was private. It was super weird. Regardless, hello, everybody. Welcome to Group Tarot's YouTube channel where I chat with different tarot creators and authors about their decks and their philosophies and any other topics of conversation that just might happen to come up. Today, I am very excited to have Lisa Robertson, the creator of Cirque du Tarot, here live with me. And where are you zooming in from, Lisa?
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. Are you there for the Super Bowl?
No, I live here.
I didn't realize that. When one of my dear friends, Buzzy, is the steward at the Sphere, and so he and I see him whenever I hop down to Vegas. I would love to give you a message the next time I come through.
Absolutely. It would be great.
So I love your Cirque du Tarot. How and why did you want to create a tarot deck dealing with circus background things? And was that your idea? Was that a publisher's idea? How did the manifestation of the deck that has truly my favorite Hierophant card that I'm going to flip through and find to show with our fine watchers? How did this deck come about?
By accident.
I love
Is the
that.
short, is the short answer. Actually, this this deck has ended up becoming my favorite deck too. Like the
Ooh.
guidebook, writing the guidebook for this deck was the most fun I've ever had writing a guidebook. I got really into this deck once we got the artist, finally nailed down the artist for this deck. But initially, like most of my decks, it was a random idea that I had way back in, I want to say at the end of 2017. So I
Okay.
had this like random idea of possibly doing something that was sort of Vegasy based because I live in
Oh
Las
yeah.
Vegas. Like, I'm around a lot of shows, right?
Yeah,
I was
totally.
like,
Very
I
circular.
like yeah, I like the whole concept of the viewer and the what it is to be viewed and then what it is to view someone else. So I was thinking about this whole concept of how do we create within the tarot this whole idea of we're looking at cards, but the cards are also looking at us. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of had like this little vague idea and I kind of mapped it out and I showed Barbara and she was like, yeah, that's really cool. And then like it went to bed for like a year and a half. Um, because then we were working on, well, actually, we just contracted the Fairy Tarot, which some of you may know is we just finished the artwork for this year. Um, and the Mermaid Tarot was just getting ready to come out.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like it got put away because other projects got started. And then before I pulled it out again, I think the Mermaid deck had just come out. So the Mermaid deck had just come out, and I was going back over some ideas, which is what I do before I do a big submission.
Mhm.
And this one was on a list of about 5 other possible ideas, and this is the one they ended up going with.
Hmm. So a couple things in there sparked my curiosity. I heard you say that this deck really started to take off when the illustrator, Josh Tufts, was solidified. So you went into this idea of a Vegas inspired deck, not actually knowing who the illustrator would be. Does that a lot of the other deck creators that I've talked with, like the partnership between um book writer and illustrator is a little more I don't want to say intentional because that makes it sound like this wasn't intentional, but that like that partnership is in place. And what I'm hearing is that this was created differently.
All my decks are created differently. I never know who's going to be doing the art. I have to create the deck first,
Hmm.
and then it has to go through the submission process.
Hmm.
And then if it's green lighted through the submission process, then we look for artists. So I think for this deck, we looked through 120 different portfolios. And then we came across Josh's, and Josh's artwork was actually in a complete different direction to how I envisioned it when I sat down to do this deck. So
Mm.
when I sat down to create this deck, in my mind, I was thinking more along the lines of something that was a little more graphic novel style.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so while I was putting it together, that's how I was seeing it in my mind. And as I was designing all the cards and getting it all ready. And then we come across Josh's work, and I looked at it and I said, yeah, Barbara and I both kind of went, oh, well, this opens up a whole different option, doesn't it? And so we got the sample cards from him, and we were just like, yeah, Josh was born to do the art for this deck. Like it was just a perfect match.
I love that. So um I found my favorite Hierophant, a card, was the idea to have the Hierophant be the production stage manager, be the one who has all of has all of the knowledge, makes sure everything is running smoothly. Was that always part of your submission in the idea behind this, or did this come out because of any collaboration with Josh?
No, the cards are already designed before we get an artist. I have to have the entire deck completed as far as the design framework is done. That's just part of the process. So
Wow.
when I sit down and design a deck for Llewellyn, the only thing that's not done is the guidebook. So we do a couple of little sample what might go in the guidebook, but everything else has to be written out. The proposal itself can be anywhere between 10 to 15,000 words.
Uh-huh.
And then in all of that, all the designs, how I envision the cards, how I want the cards, what kind of characters are going to be on the cards, that all has to be done before a project is green lighted. And it's not always the easiest thing to do because
Yeah.
you have to have enough detail so that you know what's happening in the card,
Mhm.
but not too over detailed so you can give the artist some room to breathe for interpretation. So it's always a really fine dance between kind of what I'm seeing in my head and then how the artist might get that concept.
Mm.
So no, all of these cards were already designed before Josh came on board, and then he gave his own unique spin on the interpretation of the art brief for each card.
So things like um in the Five of Cups, which like I have been this production assistant and stage manager and prop designer coming backstage to the mess and being like, I have to clean this up now. And so, but little like interesting details like the hand in the mirror of so, like whether that's a sorry I have to run on stage and make my cue, or I blah, or like all of the different ways that just that shape could be envisioned. Is it, are those the sorts of little touches that the illustrator adds in conversation with you, or in your submission where you like, and there are hands like coming out?
No, my description for that card is that we have cups that have been spilled behind stage. So each of these cards were very specific because I had to distinguish between what was on stage and what was behind stage. So what was being seen by other people and what was way in the background. So in this one, it was like, we're backstage in part of the dressing rooms. Someone has spilt their cups. Now there's chaos because who's going to clean it up? That kind of stuff like that. And then, what happens is usually the artist will send in a drawing or a sketch or some sort of interpretation of that. And if it's fine, we go, yeah, that's great, bring it to color. If it's not, we'll work through it a little bit.
So how much experience, one of the reasons why I love this deck so much is for the onstage offstage moments, because I've been in theater since I was 4 years old, and I looked through this deck and I was like, oh, here's a deck that like has some backstage life to it that feels really um real and true to a backstage world. I don't have a whole lot of experience in circus. My experience in circus is tiny. My experience in theater is huge, but there's a lot of overlap there. And so I'm curious how, like, what is your experience on stage and off stage that you wanted to bring this deck to life?
None. I have zero.
Wow. I am legitimately impressed.
I have absolutely no experience in theater whatsoever.
Did Josh?
Not that I'm aware of.
Wow. Okay. Um, I must admit, I am surprised because things like in the lovers card of just having the couple take that stolen away moment behind the curtain, whether that is like in the costume room or in a side fitting room, to just like have that have that little like bubble of togetherness before going back out and being their huge on stage personas. Like that's and the cleanup and like truly the Hierophant card, like production stage managers and production managers overall, like they don't get anywhere near the credit that
Right.
I think they deserve. And so why did you want to um what was your impulse for having this representation as the Hierophant? If you
Um,
remember, because this deck
if I
came out a
remember,
while ago, so maybe you
if
don't
I
remember.
remember, yeah,
That's
because I've
okay.
done like four other decks since then. No, I mean this one's pretty clear. I mean, all of them are pretty clear. The creation process is pretty clear to me. Like, well, I knew that working in publishing, the people who really make stuff great are the people who never get mentioned.
Mhm.
And it's the same as in film and television and in theater, is that there's all these people behind the scenes who really control what we end up getting to see.
Yep.
And for me, it was always like, so who is that person in a show? Like, who is the person in that show who holds that power, who knows everything, who's been around, who's read the books, who's the go-to person? How does this happen? What does this happen? Everyone goes to this person. And I was like, it's definitely got to be like, that stage manager behind the scenes who's making sure the show keeps flowing and that everyone's where they're meant to be and that when, fire codes are in place and that like all of the rules and stuff are being obeyed. So it was just like that breakdown of who are the people, where would they be, and what roles would they play? And then that allowed me to designate the cards.
Mm-hmm. So you had mentioned that you had that since all of this since Cirque du Tarot came out, that you have had like 4 other decks that you've been working on. What are some of the other things that you're working on that you want or can talk about? And I'm particularly interested and curious. I'm working on a deck myself right now, and I like was hesitant about doing it because I was like, is there actually a need for it? And so, and I think there is, otherwise I wouldn't continue going on with it. And so for someone like you who's creating so many decks that are marvelous, like how do you ever deal with the question of like, should I like does this deck need to be in the world? Like what and how do you know when that answer within yourself? Because obviously you have to have that yes before you even submit it to a publisher, I would presume, or correct me if I'm wrong. Um, how how does that come up or feel for you? Does that question make sense? It's more gesturing than excellent claritative words.
The short answer is months and months and months of market research. So I never bring an idea to a publisher until I have looked at the market. At the end of the day, we're producing consumer products, and if there is no need in the consumer market, then there's no need to produce it. And I work with other people to produce their own ideas and get their own decks going, and that's the very first step. So if an idea doesn't have market viability, then there's no point in pursuing it. It really is then just a passion project you're going to do for yourself. So before I consider any idea, I spend anywhere from 3 to 6 months doing really, really deep market research across all areas of publishing. And what that has done is it's been able to allow me to predict trends year in, year out. And so then I kind of know where the gaps are going to be. And then I pivot the idea to that. So I know that is going to burst a lot of creative bubbles for people. Yes, your ideas can be inspired, and some of them most definitely are, but 9 times out of 10, the ones that you see that do really well in the marketplace have had an absolute ton of market research behind them. And before a publishing house greenlights an idea, they then also have to pull sales data. So they do their own sales research before they even decide whether they're going to allocate funds, because they're allocating anywhere between $20,000 to $30,000 per project. So they need to make sure that there's a return on investment for this and it's going to be able to sell. So it's not like sitting down, being inspired, and it all falls into place. Like that comes a lot later down the track. But to get the idea off the ground, you have to understand the market, you have to understand how sales work, and you've got to be really skilled to see where those gaps are so that you can add to a story that people are already paying for.
So, do you have any I love this. Your the how your brain works for bringing your creative projects to life is very different than other people I've chatted with, and I adore that. And consequently, and so valuable. And I'm curious now if you have recommendations for new uh, and hopeful deck creators that might be listening in of how to do that market research, because you're not the first person I have heard say know the market, but like not everybody has a dramaturgical or a research instinct to know how to do that. And so, are there classes to take? Are there particular websites that track publishing data? Like how do
Nah, it's you've got to get in the trenches yourself. So actually, that's one of the things I do for my private clients is I
Okay.
do the research for them.
Mm,
Because it is a lot and you've got to know what to look for. And I guess it's just that I've been doing this for so long now, it's second nature to me. So I can spend hours on Goodreads and Amazon and review Kickstarter campaigns and go through, and I'm a little privileged in the fact that if I really need some data that's not available to the public, I can actually ask my publisher. So, like, I do have a little bit of privy to some sales data that obviously other people are not going to have access to. And I'm kind of lucky too that if I feel like my research has led me to a certain point, I can always ask Barbara. Like, so I can always just like email Barbara at Llewellyn and say, okay, so I've got a client who's thinking this. Here's what my research has said. What kind of insights do you have? And obviously, the general public does not have that. And I understand that gives me a bit of a leg up. But at the same time, the reason my career has lasted so long is because this is the skill I learned at the very beginning. So at the
mhm.
very beginning of my career, way back in 2013, I knew that I was going to have to understand business. I was going to have to understand this. So I've invested a lot of money, probably close to the tune of $60,000 in learning business and marketing and getting these skills fine-tuned. So yeah, it's not like you can just run some software on this. Like this is months of going through publishing magazines and sales and bestseller lists and all sorts of stuff. And you've got to be in the industry. So I'm still today very much, inside the publishing industry. I read the trade magazines. I go to the calls. I listen to the agents. I'm discussing things with editors. Like if you're not in the industry, you're gonna miss the important information. But as I said, I knew that at the very beginning of my career, if this was something I really wanted to take seriously, if this was going to be who I was going to be, these would be the skills I would need to learn. So I made sure I learned them.
So because your deck creations, from what I'm hearing, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're coming at this from a different angle, and I love it. I really do. It is a practice for my brain to come around. Um, so since what I'm hearing is that you come at this deck creation from really looking at the market as a whole, seeing where the trends are, seeing where the gaps are that you can fill and offer something to. It feels like somewhere in there is that
Oh, no.
magic, that shift of, okay, here's all of the information and the data from the market, and here's the deck. And so I guess the words. Um, is there is there a point where your work shifts from the larger overarching market view to the this is the deck that is needed view? And has it ever changed? Did you ever get into a project and be like, oh wait, no? Because it seems like with this process, if you get into if you're in there within the publishing world, that if something is suddenly like, yeah, this isn't feeling right, it to me, it feels like it would be harder to stop and pivot. Am I wrong?
Sorry, my computer's acting up, so I think I got half of that question.
All right. Um, what half did you hear? And maybe we just go with that because I can be long-winded trying to come to like a concise question. What did you
I
hear?
think what you're asking is, have I abandoned a creative project based on the marketing? Is that right?
That I wasn't going with a full-on abandoning, but absolutely. That I am curious to know the answer of that question.
Yes, I have, because I don't want to invest time and energy into something that's not going to have a return. So I'm sorry, my computer's doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I might actually have to log out and log back in. Could you give me just a minute?
Yeah, yeah, we totally can. So
Okay,
this,
okay. I'll be
yeah, come on back. Whee! So this Dear Watchers is a new thing to figure out. I've never had to have a guest leave because of technical difficulties and hop back into the room again. So we will see how this happens. In the interim, I will take a moment and show you some of the uh, cards in this deck. It's been around for a good few years now, so it's not like this is a it's not new in the world, but maybe it is new to you. And one of the things that I personally love about this deck is the onstage and offstage life and how all of the pages are at their dressing stations getting ready to go on. And um, there are similar themes with the knight and the royals and such. So, um, yeah, and the illustrations are just lovely and fiery. Now is also a great time if you have any questions. Hello, welcome back, Lisa.
Okay, that was weird. Like everything just crashed.
C'est la vie. C'est la vie, you
All
know?
right, let's try this again. So
Let's try this again.
what I think you were asking me was, and we can, as I said, I only heard half the question, was about the research part of the idea, correct?
Yes, and you distilled my roundaboutness into have you ever abandoned a project?
Yes. So before I got it to pitch for sure.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean,
But what about
my
after you got it to pitch? Like I
no,
can, I can.
after we've signed contracts, you're locked in. Like you've got a legal obligation then. So no, you can't just say no after that.
So what happened? Have you ever had the experience where once you were contractually obligated to a project that it was hard to become inspired for the project anymore, or because of how much um truly how much legwork and pre-design work goes in, is it easier in some ways to stay connected to a project because there's so much then back and forth between you and the artist?
For the decks, no, I've never had that problem. For the books, for sure. Like by the I've lost interest in them like after the contract's been signed. But for the decks, no. For the decks are so much fun because once the artist starts working on these images, it's kind of like someone took a snapshot inside your brain and
Mhm.
then like now you're seeing it. And it always blows my mind. Like, because I don't think a lot of people know, but these projects take 2.5 years to put together. So by the time the contracts are signed, then you're still holding the energy of this project for about another 2.5 years. For the Fairy project, it was longer. That's the longest deck Llewellyn has ever had in production. And
Mm.
I think that we're up to like, it's taken 6 years for the artwork to be finished on that one. Um, so no, once the ball's rolling, it's fantastic because then it's not really me. Then it's all the artist. It doesn't swing back to me again until like way later when I've got to put the guidebook together. And then I've got to remind myself, oh yeah, what was the purpose of this again?
So you put the guidebook together after the art is done?
Yeah, after the art is done. Well, usually once the art's about 3/4 of the way through, it kind of depends. Everything's a bit screwy at the moment because COVID threw publishing timelines out of whack. So now we're in a situation where we've got finished artwork, but the deck itself isn't due for a minute because, there's other stuff that got moved around.
Mm.
But yeah, generally speaking, once the artwork is about 3/4 of all the way through, that's when I'll start doing the guidebook.
Gotcha. And one of the things that I uh, really enjoyed with your royals in this deck is
Oh,
the
I have got so much flack from the court cards in this deck. Go ahead.
why? What is some of the flack you've gotten from the court cards in this deck? Even though I am part of the professional tarot community and technically tarot tube, like don't I don't like search out all of the controversies and the thises and the that's. So I just stay away from a lot of that. So what flack have you gotten for the court cards?
I have seen so much online about how boring the court cards were and how they were the weak link in the deck. And I was like, then you totally missed the point of why they were designed that way, because they were designed this way for a very, very specific reason. And that was to see one person go through multiple stages.
Hmm.
Because to me, that's what the court cards. I'll back up a little bit. So when I sat down to design this deck, I was like, here's my opportunity to kind of screw with our gender binary with the court cards. Because when I very first started to learn about tarot, like way, 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 way back in like 2007, 2008, the court cards were the one part of it that I didn't understand. Because I was like, who the hell are these men and why do they keep showing up? Like, I'm surrounded by women. I'm gay. There are no men. Why are these men showing up? Right? Because everything I kept reading was, well, these are the men in your life. And I'm like, but I literally don't have any men in my life. So it took me years to kind of like go, yeah, I think that might be either outdated or just really wrong.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to get into this whole idea of the court cards. And if anyone's got my books like Pathworking the Tarot or Court Cards for Beginners, I write about this as well. That the court cards to me are more like stages or steps in a process. So if we take gender out of them completely, like if we get rid of these traditional gender roles and start looking at the pages to the kings as these levels or points of self-development or points of spiritual development or professional development that we traverse, then of course the card's going to just be one person. It's going to be
Hmm.
one person going through multiple different practices and experiences. And so when I sat down to do this, I thought, here's how I can do it in pictorial form. So how we start at the page, how we move through like into the next part of it with the knight, and then like playing around with costume design and roles in the queen and the kings, but we're all still the same person. And it really, like, I always laugh when people go, oh my god, they're boring, they're all the same, and I'm like, you totally missed the point. You totally missed the point.
We literally have all of these energies in all of us, regardless
Exactly.
of our sex gender combinations. Like, And that's actually one of the things that I love about it, and how, um, because that's one of the things that I say in my readings all the time when the royals come up, because I am also queer, and so a lot of my clientele are queer within this on the spectrum, like non-binary, and so I'm like, if the gendered language is like, nope, we just change that to royals, because all of these energies are in all of us. And are they coming up because you need more of this? I'm taking care, I'm planting, I am ruling the roost, I am making sure that my needs and everybody else's financial safety needs are being met, or is that something I need in myself? And how we all get to play with the costumes and play with the masks and play with gender as a construct and play with how we are seen and received in this world. And um I love how that plays out. Um and talking about this, my eye is drawn to the ginormous dressing room mirrors in
Yeah.
the pages. And one of the things that I actually really enjoy is how each page card is basically doing the same thing, but in just a slightly different color tone, a slightly different costume to
Yeah.
put on. Um, and the question that is coming up in this moment is, why did you want the mirrors to be so big?
Well, actually, that was Josh. I just put like they were putting on makeup, like that they
Uh-huh.
were preparing. So like part of the whole show element to me too, and I talked about this in my artist brief. So before I actually go in to design the cards, I do have like this little artist brief where I talk about my vision for it, like what I want for it. And part of that too was the concept of a show is things tend to be larger than life, or they tend to be ridiculous, or they tend to have elements of the absurd or the obscure to them. So,
Mm.
you know, these big giant mirrors are part of that absurdness, aren't they? Like, why does someone so small need something so freaking ginormous? So, you know, that was just the way that Josh took some of that stuff that I talked about and pushed that into the cards.
I love that. Because just to give folks a little, this is one of the tester cards that's actually taken backstage of one of the theaters that I work in frequently, in the Theater Oracle. And it's just like it's a lovely there. When I look at these, I think of perspective a lot, and what I feel, so much. And part of the reason why I love your deck so much is that there's just not a lot that shows what actually goes on backstage at all. And so there are these fantastic ideas of what it must be like back there, or maybe this and maybe that. And the reality is often very, very different than that.
Yeah.
It is it's interesting to think about and to play with.
Well, it also then gives us three stories, right? Because like in deck design, you've already got to work with the story of the tarot. So the tarot itself is its own story. It has its own
Okay.
narrative, its own players, its own cast, its own, you know, character journeys. And any theme we put over the top of that then also has to be able to tell its story through the story of the tarot. So
Yeah.
one of the things that this does, it adds this additional layer on top of it where now we have like a backstory. Like how many tarot decks, like, and I think it's interesting that we're seeing a few more tarot decks, deck creators thinking about the concept of backstory while telling a story. So this kind of gives us like this whole thing of like, so we have the front facing story, the backstory, and then the main plot, right? So like there's multiple dimensions to this that come up as well. So when I sat down and did this, it just gave me a lot of creative freedom to think about how we tell stories and how stories are played out, and what kind of roles we have in a story and how there's multiple levels in a story. So yeah, this was a really fun deck to put together and do the guidebook for, because I think like for me this was the one that I had the most creative um license with when it comes to just different forms of narrative and narrative structure.
Mm. So, what are you working on now?
Oh my God, what am I not working on?
That you can talk about anyway. Yes,
No,
I totally
I
get
could
that
talk
you
about
can't
all of it.
always talk about everything.
No, no, that's fine. So I literally just handed back in the next round of edits for the Angel Guidance Tarot, which comes out next year. So we wrap that, fingers crossed that's done now. But yeah, we wrapped that up this month. The artwork was finished at the end of last year. So hopefully we're moving on to the next phase with that now. We're also in the process of just wrapping up, and it should be done by the 1st of May, the Unicorn Tarot, which I am collaborated. That's my very first collaborative deck that I have done with another deck creator. So a friend of mine from Scotland and I have done that deck together. And then at some point, at some point next year, maybe this year, we'll see. But at some point in the first half of next year, I'll be sitting down to finish the guidebook for the Fairy Tarot. So those are the 3 decks that we currently have that are circulating and are in different stages.
Nice. So I'm curious. I heard you say unicorn tarot, and when
Mhm.
uh, I started on my tarot journey officially when 3 different friends gave me 2 decks in one week. I was like, it is now time for me to begin my studies. And one of those decks was a unicorn tarot, and I think it was just called the Unicorn Tarot. I remember it being your standard size and sort of, uh, yellow, a lot of yellows and greens. And so, is this a reprint, redesign, refresh of that older deck, or is this something completely new that has the same name?
Oh no, this is a completely, well, it doesn't have an official name yet. So
Gotcha.
the decks
Huh.
don't get official names until after they've been wrapped up. Then marketing comes in and gives them a name.
Well,
Um,
interesting. So, because I was curious about that because, and I had meant to try and research this a little deeper before our conversation, and life derailed me in some actually rather lovely ways. But I did not get that research done because there is a deck by 78 artists that I learned as Cirque de Tarot, but I have now seen it up as Cirque de Carnival. And so I I remember being like, why are there 2 Cirque de Tarots? Did one change the name, or like is it because like how much do, and I feel like there's a difference here in terms of the larger publishing houses and the small indie deck creators also, like how do those titles come about, and is it one of those things that's thought about, like, oh, there's already a unicorn tarot, we won't use that name, or there's already a unicorn tarot but it's on a small publisher and it doesn't matter, like I know nothing about those conversations, and I'm curious if you do.
So what we get to do as deck creators is we get to toss a few ideas up. So usually we just have a working title. So the titles that I'm throwing out right now are our working titles. So the Angel Guidance Tarot was actually just the Angel Tarot while we were working on it, because it helps me separate in my brain. Oh yeah, this one's angels,
Yeah.
this one's unicorns, this one's fairy. So like we tend to just give them little working titles. And then when it comes to getting ready to do marketing, setting up marketing material and getting covers done, because it's a long process. So everything has to be finished first before we move into kit design, marketing materials, titles, and whatnot. So when we sat down to think about the angel one, I will put in a couple of suggestions, but at the end of the day, I really don't care. I'm too far into my career to like really care what it's called anymore. Like it's like you name it, you'll know it. But I know for that particular deck, we were tying it into a book that I'd already written. So like it's a deck that goes with the Divine
Mm.
Practice of Angels. So Llewellyn goes, okay, so we have this book and we know this deck is going to be kind of in some way connected to this book. Let's build a bridge title. So that's how it got Angel Guidance Tarot, because it kind of works with this book.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Smart.
so I do know that for Llewellyn, they'll run through the legal database of trademarked or registered titles first. Then they will look to see if a creator has any other content with them that they may be wanting to tie it to, or make it not too different. And then again, they'll go and they'll do the market research around how is this stuff going to work in SEO? Where will it pop up in different search engines? How will it be placed in sales catalogs? And then that's how they kind of get their name. So again, like I know I keep bursting a lot of creative bubbles in this process, but stuff has to sell. Like you have to be able to sell stuff in order to make money. Otherwise, you can't keep making stuff. So a lot of it really is about where is it going to rank? How are buyers going to find it? How a bookstore is going to find it? Will it be confused, as you said, with another product? How will it differentiate? And all that kind of stuff. So it is a little bit more technical than just trying to like pluck a name out of your butt and hoping for the best.
That is very, very fair. Um, we're coming to the wrap up time, so I want to give you a moment if there are anything that um we didn't talk about that you would like to, whether that is about Cirque du Tarot, or if that is about one of your other projects, or if that's just sort of like something that is on your mind, like this wants to be shared right now.
This wants to be shit. Oh, I don't know. Um,
So clear and delightful. I love that.
I don't know. It's like I no, Cirque to me like was just so much fun, and it's kind of sad that it got derailed a little bit, because Soul Cats, this one here, came out like 3 months afterwards because everything got stuck. I don't know if you guys remember, but during the pandemic we had all that shipping crisis too.
Yep.
So Cirque got stuck on a ship from China for like 4 months. So it was 4 months behind on its release schedule. And then
Sitting on a
the
boat.
then Soul Cat actually got fast tracked. It's all right, everything's gonna fall down. Then this one got fast tracked. So
Mhm.
what happened is Cirque came out, everything's gonna fall down behind me now, that's all right. Cirque came out, and then like 3 months later, this one came out, and they should have been a good like 6 to 8 months apart. So I'm always like, yeah, let's give Cirque some more love, because it kind of got squashed really fast under the Soul Cats release, because it got stuck on a boat in the sea for 4 months.
Yeah. Um, I am feeling called to do a little bit of bibliomancy to finish us up, to finish things up. Ooh, Two of Cups. Um, I love that. The and I especially love it when the two of cups comes up as a finding relationships that nourish you and where you can nourish each other kind of cards rather than just thinking about it as a marriage card in the deck. Um, and you wrote, if you ever wanted a message from above that someone was thinking about you, this is it. Someone with the same heart energy as yours is keeping you in their thoughts and sending you their blessings, even if you are not aware of it. Hmm.
Yeah, I thought like this is a great opportunity because we're talking about shows and plays and imagination. What is it like? What would it be like to weave this card as one person was in the physical realm and one person wasn't? Or what would it be like to like get a message from an angel or a spirit guide or something? Because we don't think about that in the Two of Cups, but the Two of Cups never specifically says that it's two physical people. It says that two, it's often described as two heads are better than one or two hearts are better than one, and that there's this platonic coming together. And I'm like, well, that could be non-physical energy, or it could be um, from people that you don't see every day. So this would be a great way to make a play on that with these two cups, one flowing from above into a vessel below.
Yeah, I love that. The in particular that uh water flowing from one vessel above to another vessel below brings up uh the imagery in Cade Burkhammer's Wise Fool Tarot, how they illustrated um temperance is a person with this huge cup pouring it into a little teeny tiny bottle, and there is a similar pouring and flowness there. And one of the things that I do as a reader is I will frequently have more than one deck in a reading because a lot of times I'm doing group readings, and so different folk in the group might be called to different decks, and so we'll mix them up. And so I love seeing how different artists' artistry still have these interesting tie-ins in other decks at times, whether that's intentional or not. So I love that.
Well, and I create a lot of decks, so they can't all be the same.
Yeah,
Right? I can't
totally.
keep creating the same image over and over and over again. So when I sit down to design a new deck now, I literally have to have every deck I've created in front of me because I'm like, well, I can't do it the same way twice. I have to come up with a new or inventive, iteration on this. And it's like, okay, you didn't like the court cards in this deck, but I bet you like the court cards in another deck of mine. It's like I can't do them the same way twice. Like that's the whole point of this is a long-term career. So it has to be different. We have to come at them a different way.
Well, I very much look forward to seeing all of the new and different ways you have coming about in your upcoming decks. And we did not have any questions pop up in the chat, but we did have some love sent our way. Thank you very much. And do tune in next month. I'm always going live on the 10th of the month at 11 o'clock Pacific time. And for those of you who are in Michigan, if you are interested in seeing the Tarot show at Convocation, I will be presenting there on the Friday of Convocation. And Lisa, thank you so much. How can folk find you, especially if they want to hire you to do the market research for them for a deck? That is a highly valuable service.
So yeah, if people want to reach out to me either on Facebook or on Instagram, I'm happy to chat with people who are ready to go down this deck creation process. God bless your little souls. Um, and we can have a chat on, the services I provide and how that all works.
Delightful. And we'll put a link to those in the description box below. And do you want to tell the fine people what your handle are in case they would rather hear it?
Sure. The Lisa Robertson is my Instagram one, and I think it's the same on Facebook, actually. I'm not 100% sure, but Instagram's probably the better one if you want to reach out there. So it is the Lisa Robertson.
Delightful. Well, Lisa, thank you so very much. Enjoy your own copy of Cirque du Tarot Fine Watchers, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.